A serious software error in New Jersey's motor vehicle system led to the improper voter registration of what we believe to be roughly six.
Wait, did she just admit what I think she admitted? An official governor is standing at a podium confessing that thousands of non-citizens were improperly registered to vote. You can't unhear this, and the domino effect is already taking down other states.
Take a look here. Favorite photo ID to vote. 85% of white people favor it. 82% of Latino. 76% of Black Americans favor it. So the bottom line is this. Voter ID is not controversial in this country. A photo ID to vote is not controversial in this country. It is not controversial by party, and it is not controversial by race. The vast majority of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj.
Did you catch the numbers on that CNN graphic? For years, the media has tried to paint the requirement of a photo ID as some incredibly controversial partisan trap. But look at the actual breakdown from their own network broadcast. 85% of white Americans, 82% of Latinos, and 76% of Black Americans absolutely favor needing a photo ID to vote. It is one of the single most universally agreed upon issues across the entire country, regardless of background or party line. Yet, somehow, the politicians on Capitol Hill act like it's a fringe idea. You literally need an ID to buy certain cold medicines, get on an airplane, or open a bank account. But asking for it at the ballot box causes a meltdown among a select few in power. The disconnect between what the citizens actually want and what the establishment pushes is staggering.
People in our state. When New Jerseyans applied for a driver's license or identification at the MVC, they were asked if they wanted to register to vote. In the case of this error, some individuals indicated that they weren't citizens and weren't eligible to vote, but the software registered them anyway. The error in the...
Let's break down exactly what she is using as an excuse here. They are blaming a software error at the Motor Vehicle Commission for essentially handing out voting rights to people who straight up checked a box saying they weren't citizens. Think about how wild that is. A non-citizen goes to get a driver's license, follows the law by indicating they aren't eligible to vote, and the state's automated system just completely ignores it and registers them anyway. They knew about this error all the way back in June of 2024, but the public is only just now getting the full picture. How do you have a software glitch that specifically defaults to registering ineligible people? If you've ever dealt with the DMV, you know they don't exactly give out freebies by accident. It makes you wonder what other automated systems in other states have the exact same glitch.
And we tell the public. I have to say, though, for Democrats, I'm not saying that the Save America, the SAVE Act is going to pass.
Yeah.
But this is not good for Democrats' argument that there's no such thing as undocumented immigrants voting.
This is not good for our country generally, I would say.
Even better.
And it is not, this is a terrible problem to have. I think she handled...
Even the panelists on CNN are having a hard time spinning this one. You can see the pure defeat in her eyes when she has to admit that this looks terrible for the country. For months, the official talking point across major networks was that undocumented or non-citizen voting was a complete myth, a ghost story made up by the other side. Now they are sitting there watching a Democratic governor confirm it on live television. They are forced to admit that this completely ruins the argument that the SAVE Act isn't necessary. When your own side is getting caught in the crossfire of undeniable administrative failures, the usual playbook of denying it just doesn't work anymore. The narrative is entirely collapsing in real time. The rules are changing fast. Hit subscribe if you want to know what they aren't telling you on the evening news. See you in the next one.
Do you believe that men can become women?
Ma'am, as the director of the museum, that's not relevant in this case.
It's very relevant. You've got men dressed up as women, and you have them on displays in front of kids. Do you think men can become women, yes or no?
So RuPaul's Drag Race, which is the upper...
It's a man. RuPaul is a man who dresses like a woman, literally.
Correct.
Wait, did you catch that? A sitting congresswoman just cornered the head of the Smithsonian with the one question nobody wants to answer right now. You have to see how this plays out.
What is a woman, Dr. Hartig?
As a director and as a historian, it's not my opportunity.
You sexualize the American History Museum. So this is a fair question. What is a woman?
So at the museum,
What is a woman?
we strive to represent and not categorize all Americans.
Okay. Look at the absolute panic in the room the second that question drops. We're talking about the director of the American History Museum, someone whose entire job is supposed to be categorizing facts and historical records. But the moment she's asked to define something as basic as what is a woman, she completely freezes up and dodges. Notice how she falls back on claiming they strive to represent and not categorize. It's a masterclass in political deflection, but it totally backfires when you consider the context of the specific exhibit they are debating. The tension here is off the charts because you can literally see the internal calculation happening in real time. She knows any direct answer is going to spark a massive firestorm online. It makes you wonder exactly how much of our core historical institutions are operating on tiptoes right now just to avoid getting canceled.
Racist. Let me be clear about something. The people that were here are the indigenous folk. And you know who ICE been rounding up? They've been rounding up indigenous people. The people that originally came, not the colonizers, but the original people. So what this is about is whiteness. Everything that this administration has pushed has been about white supremacy.
Okay, pause and just look at the raw energy radiating off her right now. She is absolutely going in, claiming that border enforcement is specifically targeting indigenous people and framing the entire system around a racial hierarchy. But did you catch the massive historical leap she just made? She's completely redefining the narrative of who built the country and who falls under immigration enforcement, basically throwing the term colonizer out there to completely shut down the opposition's argument. It's wild because she's essentially arguing that current federal laws shouldn't even apply to certain groups based on historical claims to the continent. Whether you agree with her fundamental politics or not, you have to admit this is a highly calculated rhetorical strategy designed to go instantly viral on social media. She's not just arguing standard border policy, she's throwing a rhetorical grenade into the committee room to derail the entire conversation.
What does he mean about the red discoloration in the deep, soft tissues overlaying the occipital bones? What is that? Translate.
So what that is the occipital bone is the bone in this is your skull. It's the bone in the back of your head, the directly back side of your head. So when he's describing these hemorrhages in the deep, soft tissues, it means deep in the musculature that holds your head in place, there is a red discoloration. Now, they're not describing any injuries to the skin surface, which would still be there even if he's decomposed, you would still see injuries, abrasions, bruises, lacerations, things of that nature, even with decomposition.
Right here is where the entire narrative of this incredibly tragic case takes a massive turn. We've all been hearing the wild theories flying around the internet, but watch what this chief medical examiner just pointed out. He's holding up the skull model to explain that the red discoloration everyone is panicking about isn't actually on the skin surface, it's deep in the musculature. Pay close attention to how methodically he breaks this down. People were ready to riot, thinking this was obvious blunt force trauma, but he's completely dismantling that assumption. He explicitly notes there are 0 surface injuries, no abrasions, no lacerations. It's fascinating how a single anatomical detail can completely flip a highly emotional public narrative. You really have to look past the internet rumors and actually listen to the forensic experts when things get this heated. The stark contrast between the public outrage and the cold, hard science in this clip is just staggering.
That the United Cajun Navy are so forthcoming. The fact that they told us, we haven't heard from any of their local officials, that Nolan was found face down, fully clothed. Well, that's significant to us because the last time we saw him on the videos, he was without a shirt. So at what point did he put on a shirt? Somebody saw something. Somebody knows something. There were almost 300, 400 people. Somebody knows something.
Now watch how the attorney strategically uses the missing shirt detail to build a massive sense of suspicion. He's standing there, surrounded by community leaders, heavily leaning into the fact that local officials allegedly found him fully clothed, but the viral videos showed him without a shirt. It's a classic courtroom tactic being played out in the court of public opinion. He's throwing out the number 300, 400 people to plant the idea that a massive cover-up is happening and that someone in that massive crowd must know exactly what went down. Notice his body language. He's demanding answers and stoking the fires of a conspiracy without actually making a direct, legally binding accusation. It's highly effective public relations. But you have to ask yourself, is this genuinely about uncovering the raw facts of a chaotic day? Or is it about applying maximum pressure to force a settlement before all the actual evidence even hits the table?
Is about financial repair to the descendants of the enslaved Africans.
Say what you mean, so you can say, so people understand. Yes.
Reparations.
Yes.
I think this reflects a really broad effort by the Trump administration to reshape the way the nation's history is told so that this country does not have to pay Black people for the forced labor and the unpaid labor that built this country.
Listen closely to the framing she's using here on daytime television. She's not just talking about historical education. She is directly advocating for a complete financial restructuring based on ancestral grievances. She drops the phrase unpaid labor that built this country as an absolute, unquestionable fact to justify a massive push for modern reparations. What's really compelling here is how she ties it to current political administrations, accusing the other side of actively trying to erase this narrative to avoid footing the bill. It's a huge rhetorical leap, taking a highly complex historical debate and packaging it into a neat, highly polarizing soundbite for a midday audience. It totally ignores the massive, diverse wave of immigration that occurred after that era, but it's perfectly engineered to get the studio audience nodding along. This is exactly how complex historical nuances get flattened out for television ratings.
What we know is there were no fractures or deep tissue injuries according to this independent autopsy that was paid for by Colin Kaepernick. Also have this photo that they released. There was a spot on the back of his head that stood out and that they highlighted today. We're not sure what that means, but they did note this in that independent autopsy. They also talked about the fact that they didn't have the interior wall of his neck, so they couldn't really go through that portion of his body. And then they talked about not being able to see his lungs and figure out whether or not they were full of water. So there's still a lot.
Check out the bullet points on that graphic they just flashed. This is the independent autopsy that the family literally paid for, backed by some massive celebrity money, and it still came back as a totally undetermined cause of death. Look at the anchor's face. You can tell this isn't the bombshell conclusion the network was hoping to report. They are forced to admit on live television that there are no fractures and no deep tissue injuries that would officially suggest foul play. This is a massive blow to the online sleuths who have been treating this tragedy like an interactive true crime podcast. It's a perfect example of how the internet creates a guilty verdict before the actual science is even processed. The fact that an independent, privately funded medical examiner couldn't find a single shred of evidence to support the murder theories should be a huge wake-up call to everyone jumping to conclusions online.
Wyatt went and put his smaller boat in the water, which is the Palm Beach. He's an 18-foot Palm Beach, and I drove the boat from Fort Bayou boat launch to my buddy's grandparents' house, and that's where we all planned to meet up that day. And
you say we all, who are you talking about? You, Nolan, and how many people are going to meet you guys there?
We had roughly 20 to 30 people coming on 3 separate boats with us. And so we were all following each other out there as one big group. You know, it wasn't just me and Nolan and a couple other of my buddies. There was 20 or 30 people spread out where we all met at the dock before, and then we departed to go to Horn Island. It wasn't just a couple of us. I mean, there were so many people, we had to split up between 3 boats, and we all left and all got there at the same time.
Pay attention to the kid in the camo hat here. This is the guy who was actually out there on the water, and he's completely shattering the media's timeline of events. He's calmly laying out the logistics, multiple boats, different launch points, coordinating with a huge group of people across the coast. This isn't the sinister, isolated gathering that the internet conspiracy theorists have been trying to paint it as. He specifies that 20 to 30 people were all converging from different directions. When you listen to his tone, he just sounds like a regular guy explaining a standard weekend trip that ended in a horrible tragedy, not a criminal mastermind coordinating a cover-up. It's incredible how a primary source account can completely deflate weeks of wild internet speculation. You really have to appreciate the raw honesty of just sitting down and laying out the boring geographical facts of how the day actually started before everything went wrong.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's clear, because the statements that are out there made it appear that it was just you, Nolan, and probably 2 or 3 other guys, and y'all are the only ones that went out to this island.
And that's completely incorrect. I mean, Horn Island on the 4th of July is the most popular day to be on the water on, throughout the entire Gulf Coast. I mean, everybody and their mom is on the water on 4th of July, There's no telling. I mean, roughly probably 2 to 3, maybe even 4,000 people out there. There were boats lined up off the island. I mean, there was 3 rows of boats all the way until my vision ended, until I could see of people there was 1 row of boats, and then there was another row of boats, and then there was a 3rd row of boats.
This part of the interview is absolutely crucial to understanding the chaos. He just estimated there were between 2,000 and 4,000 people packed onto that island for the holiday. Look at his hand gestures as he describes the multiple rows of boats lined up as far as his vision allowed. This totally destroys the narrative that a small, isolated group of friends were the only ones out there and somehow managed to hide something in broad daylight. With a crowd that massive, surrounded by thousands of cell phones and random bystanders, the idea of a coordinated, secret incident becomes mathematically absurd. It really highlights how out of touch the initial online outrage was with the actual reality on the ground. When you have thousands of people drinking and partying on the water, chaos is almost inevitable, but it doesn't automatically equal a targeted crime. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes devastating accidents just happen in chaotic environments. Drop a comment below. Did the media get this completely wrong? Hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.
That thousands of non-citizens were added to New Jersey's voter rolls, and some even voted because of a computer glitch. Another state says it's trying to clean that up. New Jersey.
Wait, did you catch that? A major news network just broadcasted what everyone was told was impossible. Stop scrolling because this completely changes everything.
New Jersey's Governor Mikey Sherrill says that a software error in the state's motor vehicle system led to about 6,600 people who are not citizens being registered as Garden State voters when they applied for a driver's license. She says even though the applicants answered no on the license and also state ID card application forms, well, the computer registered yes as citizens.
Look at the voting booths in the background. They're casually reporting that a computer glitch at the DMV somehow registered thousands of non-citizens to vote. Just think about the sheer scale of that for a second. We've been repeatedly told our systems are completely airtight, yet here we are watching a major network admit a single software error compromised thousands of ballots. What happens if this glitch happens in a swing state? What if it already has? The craziest part isn't even the error itself. It's how quietly this is being swept under the rug as just a technical hiccup. They expect everyone to nod along and accept that machines accidentally check boxes for citizenship. If a DMV system can't even get basic ID logic right, how can anyone trust the final tally on election night? This isn't just a mistake. It's a massive, glaring vulnerability.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Hey, Senator Thune, it's Glenn Beck, and I'm just calling as a private citizen. I just wanted to ask you, as the president has asked us to call, to please pass the SAVE Act. Well, that's my message. Just
Okay, pause and just take in what Glenn Beck is doing right here. He is literally sitting at his desk, calling a sitting U.S. Senator's office on speakerphone and leaving a voice message demanding they pass the SAVE Act. You can hear the genuine frustration in his voice, and honestly, he's doing what millions of people wish they had a direct line to do. It's wild because he's completely dropping the professional broadcaster persona and just acting like an angry constituent who is fed up with politicians stalling. Notice how he emphasizes that it all comes down to the senator's actions? He's publicly turning up the heat. When major media figures resort to leaving voicemails like a telemarketer just to get a basic election security bill moving, you know the system is deeply broken behind closed doors. They are absolutely terrified of actually holding a public vote.
Terminate. Look, what they should do? Very simple. A lot of you don't know about filibuster. They should terminate the filibuster and approve everything. Because the Democrats are going to do it. The Democrats are going to terminate the filibuster as soon as they have a chance. And then they're going to approve Puerto Rico and D.C. as a state. They got 4 more senators. They're going to end up with 12 more congressmen. They're going to get at like 40 electoral votes, and there's no reason for it. They should.
Did you hear that exact phrasing? Trump is standing up there at a massive rally, openly demanding the termination of the filibuster to force this voter ID law through. That is a massive escalation. He's pointing out that if the other side gets power, they will immediately nuke the filibuster to add new states and permanently alter the electoral map. He's basically telling his own party to stop playing nice and use the exact same cutthroat tactics their opponents use. Look at the crowd's reaction. They are absolutely eating it up because they are exhausted by the establishment dragging its feet. The tension here is insane because he's calling out his own party's leadership by name. He's putting a giant target on the back of any politician who refuses to push this through, signaling a total war within his own ranks over election rules.
And his patience is running out.
Look, the president spoke about this directly yesterday. His patience is running out. He wants to see as much of the Save America passed as possible by the August recess. He knows that's what the American people want to see passed. He was just traveling on the road yesterday, spoke about this, and there was a very loud applause from the people in the audience, the everyday Americans, because voter ID is common sense. They want proof of citizenship and
Check out the body language of the press secretary here. She is not mincing words. She just stated that the president's patience is completely running out. This isn't your standard polished political dodge. She's drawing a line in the sand right before the August recess, heavily implying that if this legislation doesn't move, there will be massive consequences. The split screen makes it even more intense, showing exactly who is applying this pressure. You can feel the absolute urgency in the room. They are desperately trying to force a vote on proof of citizenship before the upcoming elections, and they know the clock is ticking. What's fascinating is how direct she is about the American people demanding this. It's a calculated move to corner lawmakers into going on the record about voter ID, forcing them to either support it or publicly explain why they want to block it. The rules are changing fast. Drop a comment and let me know if you trust the system. See you in the next one.
Social media video shows 4 Madison police officers struggling to detain a male suspect on Wednesday. One officer attempts to tase him, then another shoots him 3 times, about 2 seconds later.
MPD officers were dispatched to a call just before 1 p.m.
Stop scrolling. What you are about to see is the exact 2-second mistake that caused an entire city to absolutely melt down.
Video shows officers throwing a knife to the ground after the shooting. Chief Patterson said 2 officers were injured and the suspect died at the hospital. On Wednesday night, demonstrators gathered to protest the shooting at the Wisconsin state capitol, interrupting a summer concert event.
Young black
murdered at 2 o'clock p.m. by the Madison Police Department, and you guys are out here having steak and chicken and nothing happened.
Wait, did you catch that? Look closely at the people sitting at the tables in the background. You have a massive crowd marching straight through what looks like a quiet summer dinner event, and the sheer disconnect between the two groups is wild. Some diners are literally just continuing to eat their food while a megaphone is blaring inches from their ears. It's this surreal clash of two completely different realities happening on the exact same pavement. What's fascinating from a psychological standpoint is how people react to sudden chaos. You see a few pulling out their phones to record, typical modern response, but others are rigidly ignoring it, almost as if acknowledging the disruption gives it power. When you break down the crowd dynamics here, it's a textbook example of social friction. The organizers clearly chose this specific spot for maximum discomfort, forcing a captive audience to absorb their message. Whether you agree with the tactics or not, from a pure strategy level, disrupting a relaxed upper-class environment guarantees you're going to get an emotional response, and more importantly, camera time.
Then another shoots him 3 times, about 2 seconds later.
MPD officers were dispatched to a call just before.
Let's rewind and look at the actual street footage, because the tactical breakdown here is intense. Notice the positioning of the officers right before everything escalates. You have multiple people trying to control a single chaotic element, and that's where the communication completely breaks down. One officer goes for the taser. You can actually see the deployment, but immediately after, it goes horribly wrong. When multiple tasers are pulled, or when one fails to connect with the target properly, panic sets in instantly. The shift from non-lethal to lethal happens in literally 2 seconds. It's a terrifying window into how fast a standard apprehension turns into a worst-case scenario. Also, pay attention to the officer on the far right. His body language completely shifts the moment the situation goes sideways. There's a massive debate right now about protocol and whether this could have been handled differently with better spacing or verbal commands. But when you look at the raw speed of this altercation, it highlights just how microscopic the margin for error is out there on the asphalt.
Video shows officers throwing a knife to the ground after the shooting. Chief Patterson said 2 officers were injured and the suspect died at the hospital. On Wednesday night, demonstrators gathered to protest the shooting at the Wisconsin State Capitol.
Look right there, just near the front tire of the bicycle. That small metallic object on the asphalt is what this entire situation hinges on. That is allegedly the knife the suspect pulled, completely changing the threat level of the encounter. But what's really sparking outrage isn't just the altercation itself, it's what happens immediately after the threat is neutralized. Watch the officer's movements once the suspect is down. There's a highly controversial claim floating around that they failed to render immediate medical aid and instead focused entirely on securing the perimeter and treating their own injured officer. From a procedural standpoint, securing the weapon and the scene is step 1, but the public expectation is instant life-saving measures. This is exactly where the friction between police training and civilian optics reaches a boiling point. The crowd sees a lack of empathy. The officers see an active, unsecured crime scene. It's this massive disconnect in real-time crisis management that ends up fueling the exact kind of protests we just watched.
A man died at the hands of state-sanctioned violence.
He was fucking murdered. Say it.
Say it. It was murder. It was murder.
Say it. It was murder. This is my statement.
Murder.
This state-sanctioned violence was an execution.
Now check out the rhetoric being used here. This isn't just a random person in the crowd. This is a state politician holding the megaphone, and her choice of words is incredibly deliberate. Listen to how she frames the entire event. She doesn't just call it a tragedy or a mistake, she actively labels it a state-sanctioned execution. That is a massive, highly charged escalation in language. When an elected official uses that specific terminology, it completely bypasses any ongoing independent investigation and immediately validates the most extreme emotions of the crowd. It's a masterclass in political opportunism, right in the middle of a volatile situation. By shouting those exact words, she's not trying to calm the waters, she's throwing a match onto gasoline. It's fascinating to watch how raw tragedy gets instantly weaponized for political capital. The moment those words leave her mouth, the narrative shifts from a chaotic street altercation to a deliberate, systemic plot, totally changing the trajectory of the public outrage.
Madison Police Chief John Patterson said the suspect fled the initial scene on a bicycle before those 4 officers re-encountered him around 1:30, and a fight ensued.
During the struggle, the man, we're told, pulled out a knife, and an officer was injured by this while attempting to arrest him. The taser was deployed. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful.
Let's jump back to how this entire pursuit actually started, because this context is completely missing from the viral clips. Watch this guy navigating through heavy daytime traffic on a bicycle. He is actively fleeing the initial scene. When a suspect is mobile like this, weaving between cars, it creates a massive logistical nightmare for law enforcement. You can't just perform a pit maneuver on a bike, and a foot chase in active traffic is incredibly dangerous for everyone involved. Notice the sheer unpredictability of his path. This erratic movement forces the officers to constantly recalculate their intercept vectors while dodging civilian vehicles. The adrenaline is already spiking before the physical confrontation even begins. This brief chase phase is critical because it sets the baseline tension. By the time they actually make physical contact on the asphalt, both the suspect and the officers are already operating at peak stress levels. It perfectly illustrates how a seemingly slow-speed pursuit can rapidly compound into a high-stakes, fatal encounter. Take a look at this wider angle of the disruption. We've moved past the megaphone and are now looking at the sheer volume of the crowd pressing into this dining space. Look at the body language of the people sitting down. Some have their arms crossed, staring straight ahead, completely refusing to make eye contact with the protesters. It is a literal standoff of endurance. The chanters are using physical proximity and overwhelming volume to break the social contract of this private event. What is striking is the absolute polarization captured in a single frame. On one side, you have raw, unfiltered, organized anger demanding immediate systemic change. On the other side, you have defensive apathy, people just trying to finish their meals while a movement literally surrounds their tables. In modern protests, the goal is no longer just to march down an empty street. The goal is to create inescapable, high-definition friction. This footage right here is the ultimate visual representation of a fractured society clashing in real time. Hit that follow button if you want more raw breakdowns like this, and tell me what you think in the comments.